This is The Law Show on CL 650. Now back to the show.
The family in happier times. Sister Sledge, as we return here to the Law Show with our wills and estates lawyers, John Lakes and John White from Lakes White LLP in North Vancouver. We're talking about, among other things, undue influence on the program. And John White, just before we went to break, we were talking about some of the way it used to be. But under the new Wills and Estates Succession Act, or WESA, here in British Columbia, the law has changed, and that also refers to various undue influence aspects of the law, right?
Well, right, and it's changed in a way that's really important for what I do in looking at these cases and bringing them to court, because so much of what we look at when we bring cases to court is who has to prove what. Who has what we call the burden of proof.
Right, okay.
Sometimes we call it the onus of proof. It's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Who's got to prove something? And as I said before the break, it used to be that the person who was alleging undue influence had the burden of proving undue influence, which was often very difficult and very risky if you didn't prove it. The new legislation changes that a bit. And in particular, if the person claiming undue influence says something like, well, the potential for dependence or domination of the will maker was present. That is, it's possible, the situation was set, the table was set for there to be undue influence, and then also claims that the person they say unduly influenced the will maker used their position
to their benefit.
To their benefit.
Right. They got more money than everybody else.
Right. So if that's what the claim is, and the person who's making that claim shows that the potential was there for dependence or domination, in other words, that sets the table.
Sure.
Then the burden of proof shifts to the person who is in that position of potential dominance to show that they didn't unduly influence.
Ah,
and,
so that's a good change, isn't it?
That if you're trying to prove undue influence, it's definitely a good change.
Right.
If you're trying to defend against one of these cases, it's not a good change.
So you've been in both situations, haven't you?
It depends on what side of the case you're on.
Exactly. Now, speaking of cases, both John Lakes and John White have, I feel very much like the Law Show today. I have all of these Supreme Court decision paperwork in front of me. It's wonderful. I'm reveling in it. But talk to us about a couple of these recent cases, and these are cases that have been decided since WESA, the new Wills Estates Succession Act, was proclaimed in British Columbia. So this is all pretty fresh stuff, isn't it, John White?
Yes, these cases are from 2015. One of the cases we're going to be looking at was only decided a couple of weeks ago.
Okay. Which case is that?
And that's the case of Kong and Kong.
Oh, this, now check this one out, friends. This, you want to talk about a family feud. This, they make a movie out of this one. Go ahead, John.
Well, I mean, first of all, you've got 7 kids.
Okay.
So there's a big cast of characters. You've got the family patriarch who worked his way up, did a great job in Canada, and raised this large family. Most of the children of whom were successful adults. There was one kid who wasn't quite as successful as the others. When the patriarch of the family died, there's then a big fight over whether he was unduly influenced in leaving the will or leaving his property in the way that he did.
As a quick aside, was it a sizable estate? Was there a lot of dough here? Did these kids get all up in arms over a significant amount, or was this just some family vitriol that had been waiting and simmering for years?
Well, I don't recall the precise amount at issue, but it was enough to fight over.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
And that raises a good point. I mean, sometimes there's lots of family vitriol, but there's simply nothing worth fighting over. It's just not worth having the battle, and hopefully those cases settle.
So tell us about the 7 kids here. So what was the deal? Dad died and left 6 of the 7 out of his will. Did he cut them off completely, John?
He didn't come off completely,
but left the minimal amounts, and then the one son who was not in the same category as the other 6 industrious, successful adult children got the most of the loot. Is that the nub of Dad's decision?
That's basically the setup. And so then we've got questions of, well, was he unduly influenced to structure his affairs that way? And these cases are all fact-specific. That is, they depend completely on what the evidence is and what the evidence shows actually happened. And so it's difficult to digest a governing principle out of these cases beyond sort of the very basic principles, such as the section from the Wills, Estates, and Succession Act, which I just quoted. I mean, that's a pretty basic principle.
Sure, sure.
So at the end of the day, the court looked at all.
So there would be, in court, there would be 6 kids versus 1 kid. That would be the 2 tables, the plaintiff and the defense, right?
Well, that's right. And sometimes the large group of children are represented by more than 1 lawyer.
Of course, yeah.
In this case, and some of them don't participate at all. You often see that in wills cases where not all of the
not everybody wants to fight, huh?
Not everybody wants to fight. Some people take no position. Some people don't respond to the case, and they're just absent from the case. And as long as you can explain to the court, that you've served them properly, that they knew about the case, and they've chosen not to participate in it, that's fine.
That's their choice.
That's their choice.
So what was the upshot of the case here? How did it turn out?
Well, the upshot is that after looking at all this evidence from all of these kids and all of these witnesses, the court concluded that if you like, the kid who got the lion's share of the estate had not unduly influenced his father. He had in fact conducted himself really in the way that you would expect somebody to conduct themselves.
And his brothers and sisters tried to say, no. He was really in there stirring the pot with the rest of us had no control over.
Right, and they couldn't prove that. And there was a slight variation of the will. It wasn't significant. One of the kids got a little more, but it wasn't a major change. So when all the dust had settled, the situation looked pretty much like it did before the fight began.
So the case of the allegation of undue influence against this one brother was rejected by the courts.
That's right.
So do we have a case to quote?
Can I just make too? There was a risk with them too, because of course they had to pay the court costs.
Right.
And
if you lose, you're stuck with the costs, right?
Which can be quite expensive.
Right. And what I was looking for, John, do you have an example of recent case law where undue influence was found to have been at play in the outcome of a case?
I don't have that in these 2015 cases that we've been looking at, but it certainly does happen.
Right.
Where and undue influence can happen for any number of reasons. There are as many examples of it as almost there are undue influence cases. Everyone is different.
Does it usually, though, boil down to the person, the will maker, being too vulnerable and being basically overwhelmed, whether it's by an outside person, a son or daughter, a brother, sister, just someone who knows how to press all those buttons and press them all at once?
Overwhelmed is a great word. That captures the point perfectly. It's the will of the person making the will. Their intentions are being completely overwhelmed or overborne by the person exerting the undue influence. That's the undue part. I mean, there's nothing wrong with influencing someone as to how they structure their affairs. The problem is undue influence.
Well, I just want to add too. Sometimes the person is overly helpful. And the old song about the smiley people tell lies.
Smiling faces sometimes tell lies.
That's often the issue. The person's sort of over the top. They go out of their way to be special to mom, and that's part of the whole isolation. They try to influence mom through kindness.
Sure.
But one of the things I want to emphasize on this is that if a will is done by a professional person, that will usually not be knocked out by undue influence, because the whole concept is you're not going to risk your professional career on one will.
Right. And we'll come back. We need to take a quick break here,
Yeah.
John. But when we come back, we'll talk more about structure, getting it right the first time. John Lakes and John White, it's The Law Show on CIL 650. Back after this.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CIL 650.